Thank you, Chair. We would once again like to state that we stand against the selective examination of country-specific issues in the United Nations and believe that they lead us to confrontation. Moreover, they are divisive, they sow argument, they waste our time, our resources, they burden our agenda. As experience has shown, country-specific resolutions have never brought use to anyone. They create artificial barriers to the constructive dialogue on an equal footing between interested states. Once again, the Human Rights Council has an effective platform for the assessment of human rights situations in all countries without exception, and we believe that this is the platform that should be used to address any existing issues. This platform creates the appropriate conditions to ensure that countries fulfill their international obligations. In connection with this position, we will vote against. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the delegation of Belarus and...
Thank you, Madam Chair. China always believes that all countries should, on an equal footing, take constructive dialogue and cooperation to address differences in the area of human rights. We are opposed to politicizing human rights issues or taking human rights issues out of a political concern to exert pressure upon sovereign states. This serves no purpose of resolving problems. On the contrary, it will exacerbate confrontation in the area of human rights. As a result, the Chinese delegation will vote against a resolution L26. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'd like to thank the delegation of China, and now I give the floor.
Kindly verify that your vote is correctly reflected on the screens. Kazakhstan is requesting the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just explanation of vote.
The voting is concluded. Please lock the voting machine.
I'd like to ask you to be quiet in the room. Please quiet in the room so that we can continue with our debate and the explanations of vote. I'd like to give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Brazil.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brazil decided to abstain on the resolution situation of human rights in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea in the city of Sevastopol, Ukraine. Brazil has stated its concern about the gravity of the situation since the very early stages of the Ukrainian crisis. Brazil supports all efforts to achieve a solution within the legal frame of the Charter of the United Nations on the basis of respect for institutions and human rights. We urge the parties to engage in constructive talks aimed at preventing human rights violations and bringing the crisis to a peaceful solution. In this context, Brazil believes that the unbalanced nature of the text of the resolution does not contribute to promote dialogue and de-escalate tensions. Bearing that in mind, it is of utmost importance that all stakeholders exercise maximum restraint in order to build an environment conducive to a proper political solution to the crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kyrgyzstan is committed to implementing and observing fundamental human rights and freedoms in accordance with the UN Charter and norms of international law. At the same time, we believe that considering and adopting country-specific resolutions in the third committee does not lead to a balanced approach to existing human rights issue, and that it politicizes the work of the committee. We are convinced that only dialogue and constructive interaction that takes into account regional and country peculiarities, as well as cultural and historical backgrounds of countries, can facilitate the successful addressing of these issues. Hence, our abstention on this resolution. Thank you.
I thank the delegation of Kyrgyzstan. Now I give the floor to the delegation of Kazakhstan.
I thank you, Madam Chair. The situation in Ukraine and deteriorating relations between the Russian Federation and Ukraine are especially sensitive and painful for Kazakhstan. It is of special importance for our country that Ukraine remains a stable and independent state with a diverse multi-ethnic and multi-confessional society in which all human rights are upheld. At the same time, we are against politicizing the issue of human rights in general, including the politicization of the third committee agenda. Kazakhstan opposes selectivity in assessing the human rights situation and the use of human rights as an instrument to put pressure on the member states for political purposes. We believe that this draft resolution is not aimed at solving the problem and does not reflect the essence of the issue, namely the human rights situation in Ukraine. The draft is not conducive to dialogue and to resolving the crisis, but instead leads to a stalemate and further aggravation of contradictions between Russia and Ukraine, as well as between Russia and some other countries. We also consider that the resolution is not related to the third committee, as it refers to the matters of territorial integrity, annexation and occupation. Kazakhstan calls on all member states to engage constructively on the issues of human rights protection. Instead of confrontation, counterproductive and coercive approaches, we insist on the need to promote and protect human rights through equal dialogue in a spirit of mutual respect and cooperation. Taking into account all above mentioned, Kazakhstan has voted against this resolution. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Greece, reiterating its commitment to the protection of human rights, has voted in favor of the resolution Situation of Human Rights in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol.
And for that statement, I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Argentina. Thank you very much, Madam President. The delegation of Argentina voted an abstention on this resolution because we believe that it contains a number of provisions which go beyond the mandate of the third committee. Nevertheless, we do share the great concern at the human rights situation in Crimea, particularly with regard to allegations of violations and abuses based both on ethnic origin and discriminatory laws that particularly affect the Tatar minority, and for the access, the lack of cooperation with international human rights mechanisms. Therefore, we make a strong appeal for the human rights of all those living in Crimea be respected, and that violations and abuses that have been noted by the Office of the High Commissioner be investigated, and those who are responsible be brought to justice. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Argentina for that statement, and now I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Algeria. You have the floor.
Gracias, Señora Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
A delegation abstained in the voting on the resolution 26 submitted for our consideration today. Despite our abstention, we would like to reiterate our strict adherence to the principles and objectives enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations, specifically those stated in Article 1 and Article 2 that refer to territorial integrity, political independence and sovereignty, as well as equal right and self-determination. We consider those principles as the main cornerstones of international relations and the basis of international law. Algeria takes pride in its close and friendly relationship with all concerned, and join the calls for the continuation and strengthening of the constructive dialogue. Algeria will obviously continue to contribute to that end, both directly or within the regional and political group to which we belong, in order to improve the situation and the relation between all concerned. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank the distinguished ambassador of Algeria for his statement. Now I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Armenia.
Madam Chairperson, my delegation has asked the floor to explain its position on a resolution contained in the document A/C3/71/L26. Armenia has always been a staunch supporter of the efforts aimed at promoting democracy, fundamental freedoms and human rights, including the equal rights and self-determination of peoples. In our view, situation related to the human rights should be discussed and addressed by applying those norms and principles which are a part of international human rights law. While the current resolution is introduced in the human rights context, the references to the principle of territorial integrity that are selectively applied at the expense of our principles of international law, including the right of self-determination, go beyond the declared objective of the document. In accordance with its consistent stance, Armenia is not in a position to support such an approach that introduces a hierarchy between the principles of international law. Furthermore, the resolution contains a reference to Resolution 68/262 of 27 March 2014, to which Armenia voted against due to the same consideration as mentioned above. The explanation of vote was circulated by the delegation of Armenia on the day of adoption of that resolution. Our approach has not changed since then. On this basis, Armenia voted against the draft resolution containing document A/C3/71/L26. I thank you, Madam Chairperson.
I thank the delegation of Armenia. Now I give the floor to the distinguished delegate of Singapore.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. My delegation would like to make the following statement as explanation of position after the action on the draft resolution L26. We firmly believe that the continuation of the practice of selective adoption of country-specific resolutions in the Third Committee of the General Assembly and exploitation of the mechanism for political ends breaches the UN Charter and principles of universality, non-selectivity, and objectivity in addressing human rights issues, and undermine cooperation as the essential principle to promote and protect all universally recognized human rights. These resolutions can only further confrontation and polarization. Third Committee is not the right venue to discuss such highly politicized issues that fall beyond its mandate. Based on these considerations, we voted against the draft resolution L26, and I request you, Madam Chair, this statement be reflected in the report of this session. I thank you.